So I started Shea Earnshaw's first and only, to date at least, adult novel, and that is A History of Wild Places. And this is about a small community called Pastoral, and most people don't even know about it. But it opens with a man named Travis Wren, and he has the ability that if he touches something, he can see snippets of the life of the person who owned it. For example, when he picks up his father's glasses, he can see different places his father has worn the glasses, laid them down. Where this comes into play is that he uses this ability on cold cases to basically help find the people who are missing. And in the opening of the book, he has taken a case for a woman named Maggie St. James. She is a children's author, and she writes kind of dark books.
I wouldn't miss me.
And these books have become very popular, but they're also a little bit not popular with parents. Some parents want to ban them because in the book, the girl Eloise, who's the main character, follows a fox into the woods and has all sorts of adventures. And a lot of kids have decided to do this, and unfortunately many of them did it when it was cold at night and wound up being injured or killed, getting hypothermia mostly. And so she has disappeared. And one thing that was found was there's 5 books in the series, and as a gift, her parents bought her a necklace, and it had 5 little silver charms on it. Each was a book numbered 1 through 5. And they found in her car the charm for book number 3. So Travis has this, and he's looking for it, basically following. He can see her apparition as he holds this charm. So he follows it, and he finds the community of Pastoral. And then that's all part 1. Then part 2, it goes to Theo, his wife Calla, and her sister Bee. And this is about a year or 2 later, and kind of follows them living in Pastoral. And this is when you find out there's something in the community called the rot. And you see it in the trees, but humans can also contract it. And so everyone in Pastoral is worried if they leave, then they'll bring the rot back. When they allowed insiders in, they had to be quarantined to make sure they didn't bring the rot in. And I have a bunch of notes on my phone here. And so I'm wondering, like, how exactly did the rot start? Like, it seems to be nowhere else in the world. It's only in Pastoral. And it seems like nobody contracts it until they come to Pastoral. And how exactly did they make this boundary? So there's a lot of mystery so far. And then the rot, I was questioning for a while, is it real? Because you find out Theo's been leaving the barrier. He'll take 5 steps, set a stone down, go back. Then the next night, he'll do it again. And he can do this because he works at the outpost, the guard post, which is right on the barrier. So he knows where the barrier is, nobody else is there. So, 5 steps, everything nobody knows. He's been doing this for a year, he has no symptoms. So I was kind of wondering, I was like, okay, is it something that the leaders are doing if they know, like as soon as they know somebody went past it, they then have something that infects them. And it's not that Theo's immune, it's that the leadership doesn't know, so they can't make him infected. But then we start hearing about the trees. And this is a quote from Calla. And she says, "In the trees, I hear a cracking sound, like someone running a hooked claw down the rough bark of a tree, peeling it away to reveal the soft white center inside, like flesh, like the parts of a tree you shouldn't see." And there's another scene in which Bee, her sister, who went blind, she's walking around, she knows she's crossed the barrier, and she touches the tree, and she can feel the rot. It's not sap. It feels more like tar. And yeah, so it seems like the rot is real. However, can it infect people? That part I'm not entirely sure of. But it does sound like something's wrong with the trees. And then we have as well now found out that Travis has his notebook with all his notes about Maggie. He left it in Theo's house because basically their little sunroom in the back, because they're really far away from Pastoral, they have used the farmhouse to quarantine the new people whenever they come in. And the sunroom's kind of at the back of the house, and then there's nothing else there. There's the sunroom and then just an open hallway, and then you have your living room, your kitchen, so it's kind of separate enough that it's safe enough. And so in the sunroom, Theo finds Travis's notebook that has all his notes about Maggie St. James, and he says the last note in there is that she's here. And then Calla, she's out in her garden. It's her garden. Neither Theo nor Bee nor anybody else goes in there. It's her own private place. And she feels compelled to dig under a rose bush, and she finds the little charm that Theo used to find Pastoral. And then digging further, she finds the first book in Maggie St. James's series. And in that is a note that says, "Do not forget." And so they're starting to suspect that maybe they're still in Pastoral. Perhaps, obviously they were there. Maybe something happened. Did they get sick with the rot and die? Or was it something more sinister? And so far it's just been really, really interesting. And there's a lot of really good quotes. And so in the very beginning, when we have Theo and Calla, this is from Theo's point of view, talking about Calla. He says there are secrets under her fingernails, deceit in the creases of her eyelids. And this is before the whole thing about Maggie St. James has really become full-blown. And now you have Calla discussing Bee. And she says, "My sister is a nocturnal creature. She has always preferred the night. Even as a child, she preferred the weight of shadows over the bright warmth of the sun." And then, as well as this, we have a side plot going on with Levi, who is the leader of Pastoral, and Bee, Calla's sister. So Bee and Levi have always been close. As they became older, they fell in love. They are now lovers. Bee has found out she's pregnant, and when she tells Levi she's pregnant, he says, "I was never sure if you really loved me anyway, if you wanted to be my wife. You've always talked of the outside, of leaving. I never thought you really wanted to be here with me." And I absolutely despise Levi. Because when you start reading it, you have Levi, and you get some chapters from Bee's point of view, and she talks about her and Levi's relationship, the fact that nobody really knows they have a relationship. But she is more or less okay with this until she finds out she's pregnant. And then she's like, look, I love you. I've always loved you. You know this. why don't we get married? And he says instead that he's going to marry somebody else. And, I mean, of course, he has every right to marry who he wants, but the fact that he kind of strung B along, she's always loved him, always wanted to be with him, has been loyal to him, and it seems like he never had any intention of marrying her. He was just there for the physical benefits. And not only that, but the fact that he waits until she says she's pregnant to break up with her. And not only that, but to say that he's going to get married. Like, you've obviously been planning this for a while. You should have ended it forever ago. And then another reason I dislike him is there's another woman who is pregnant, and of course you can't leave pastoral to go to a hospital or anything, and most of the time this isn't a problem, but she has the baby about 2 months premature. There is something wrong with the baby's heart. The baby needs a hospital, possibly surgery. This has been told to Levi, and he decides that no, we can't leave pastoral, we can't risk bringing the rot in, which, I mean, yeah, that does kind of make sense, but he's callous about it, and he constantly refers to the baby as it. It's never the baby, or, the baby girl. It's always, he always just says it. Which really makes me question, does he truly care? And then he also mentions to Theo, when Theo goes to talk to him and try to convince him that, hey, let me go for help. He says, we don't know how far the rot's spread. Even if we could get out, there might not be anything left. And I have a lot of suspicions about him. But, yeah, we'll see how this book ends. I'm just a little bit over halfway through, and there's a lot of mysteries. It's really well written. And I'm excited to get back into it, so I will update you all later. So I've read a little bit further, and we now find out what the ceremony is. This has been mentioned several times by both Theo and Calla. They've both said, Theo said, I could go and get help, but I would have to undergo the ceremony first. Calla says, basically the same thing. He could go, but he'd have to undergo the ceremony. And so we find out what this is. There is an old tree in the center of Pastoral known as the Mabon tree. Those who go past the border are buried under this with just their heads sticking out and their arms tied up above them. This goes on for 3 days. And then they are cut to see if their blood comes out red or black. If it comes out black, that means they have the pox. And so this is the ceremony that's been mentioned. Obviously, it's very cruel, and it makes everybody deeply uncomfortable when this is done. And unfortunately, it does not work. So I'm still kind of wondering how the heck has... Theo hasn't gotten it. He's been going over the border. Then Calla should have gotten it from him. Or, at one point, he pulls her through the rain. And this is a whole nother thing. They say that the rain could bring the pox. But, if the rain can bring the pox, the rot can make them sick, then why are there crops, the grass, the trees that are inside the community? Why do none of them get the rot if it comes from the rain? And again, they're not 100% sure of this. They suspect it because several years ago somebody got caught out in the rain. They kept working for, an hour or two, and then they wound up getting the rot. And they're not entirely sure, did he maybe go over the border because the fence he was working on was near it. It was dark, it was rainy, he could have accidentally went across. But then we also have B, who has went across the border several times. She is not sick. So what is so special about these three? I could understand maybe both B and Calla because they are sisters, so it could be genetic. Obviously, Theo's not genetically related to either of them. So where is this immunity coming from? And yeah, so obviously I'm really enjoying this so far. And again, I'm looking forward to reading more. And I will update you all again when I have more thoughts. So I've read a little bit more. And throughout the book, we've been getting snippets of the book that was written by Maggie St. James. And this is Eloise and the Foxtails. And at one point, we have Calla and Theo talking to each other, and Theo's remembering snippets of a nursery rhyme. And he asks Calla about it, and she says she has no clue, but she really does. And she says that I know exactly what he's talking about. It's the nursery rhyme from the book that turned Eloise into the villain. And then you get a little excerpt from the book, and you get to hear what it is. Or rather, I should say, you get to read what it is. And this says, "Let the night woods bury you alive. Let the dark swallow you whole. You are not a girl tonight. You are a beast stripped of your soul." And while she reads this, she is in this museum of lost things that she followed the fox to. So then she climbs back up out of this museum that's at the bottom of the well. And so now it says when she climbs up, she was not the same. Eloise was no longer the heroine of this story. She was something else. She was the dark between the tree branches. She was the vile thing that is hidden in corners and low places. She was the shadow, the monster. And I know I've shared a lot of quotes from this, but I know I've spoken about Shea Earnshaw before. I've said her writing is really atmospheric, and that's exactly what I mean. And I know some people don't particularly like that writing style. For me, it's hit and miss, but Shea Earnshaw's writing is always able to use that and bring it into her world, so I really enjoy it, at least in this instance and in all of her books that I've read. And I'm excited to keep reading, as I've said before, so I'm going to get back to it. So another thing that's making me suspicious of Levi is we get a chapter from B's perspective. At this point, Levi has gone ahead and married Alice Walker, and B comes to his house to confront him, and he says, how he still loves her and everything, and she's thinking to herself of, if you love me, then why did you marry somebody else? Why are you denying her child? And during this whole exchange, Levi says, where does he say? So I have to find it. I didn't mark it. He says, there we go. "You were always better than me. Smarter even. I always knew it. Even when we were kids. It's why I had to." And then he trails off. And then, at the end of the chapter, B says, "For the briefest moment, I can see again. For a moment, I think I can see the ceiling, the tiny blue floral pattern of the wallpaper. I think I see the window, looking out at the tall pines. And it terrifies her. So I'm wondering, the way Levi trails off, I had to what? Did he do something to make her lose her eyesight? And then earlier on, he's talking about the two men who tried to leave and get help. And he says that they were punished. They were traitors. They weren't traitors, B argues. They only wanted to save Ash's child. It doesn't matter why they did it, only that they did. They had to be punished. And she says they were sick. That's why they were hung. Not because they did something wrong. They were sick. And Levi replies, they see what they want to see. Everyone does. So when he cuts them, and the blood is black, is that just because, blood can be dark and it looked black, and everybody just believed that they left they're infected, or what? So yeah, I'm really not trusting Levi. And throughout the whole book as well, he's been worried about his standing as leader. He's been worried, does everybody respect me? He feels like he's losing control. And Theo quite often says his paranoia, referring to this worry and need for control. So I'm wondering, is all of this just something that was concocted by the original leader and passed down somehow? Or are they somehow making the trees look sick? I'm really confused, and I really want to know what's going to happen. I have just about 100 pages left, so I will probably not finish this tonight, but I will finish it tomorrow, hopefully. But yeah, that's all the updates I have for right now. So I've now finished A History of Wild Places, and I figured out a couple of the big twists only about a chapter before they were revealed. So we have a scene where Theo confronts Levi about Maggie and Travis. And Levi says they're not here. They were never here. We don't know them. You know that they were never here. And goes on and on about that. But then he throws something in the fireplace, and Theo finds out it's the last page that's missing from Travis's notebook, and it's the rest of Maggie's necklace. And so at this point I also started to wonder, are Theo and Calla Travis and Maggie? Because they're strangely protective of the foxtail book that Maggie wrote and notebook that Travis has. And then on top of this, Theo has an ache behind his ear, and he says it's an old distant pain, the memory just out of reach. And so that was when I kind of started to suspect, and obviously that did wind up being true. And then we find out where the trees were splitting open, B was actually cutting them open. And so I was wondering, is this on Levi's orders? And I was like, well, why would she do it? And then you find out, yeah, she was doing it. Yes, it was on Levi's orders. However, you also find out he was learning how to hypnotize people. So he's kind of used the hypnosis and his general charisma to build up this history of pastoral. And then it does end with B having her daughter, and right before that, Maggie and Travis, aka Calla and Theo, they go back to the real world. Then they figure out that they don't necessarily want to stay there, so they go back to Pastoral and kind of make a new life there, change Pastoral for the better. So I did really enjoy this, and as I've mentioned before, Shea Earnshaw is really good at creating that dark atmosphere with her writing and her descriptions, and this book was no exception. And I do feel like not everybody will like her writing, because it can get a little bit into like purple prose, and I'm hit and miss with the purple prose. Sometimes I like it if it adds to the story. If it doesn't, or if it's just doesn't make sense, like what they're trying to compare just doesn't mesh, then I don't enjoy it so much. But Shea Earnshaw is really good at it, and if you like kind of the dark atmospheric mysteries, I can definitely recommend any of her books, including this one. This one is a little more of an adult book. They are, they're not kids trying to solve this mystery. They are, adults, and they have to deal with a lot different ramifications and decisions, obviously, like, with the baby and the baby's life and everything. So, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and end this here, and I will see you all next time in the book cave.